So influencers are a multiplier category. The basic strategy we've been employing in Illinois is to build capacity at the influencer level because it helps influence the other two. And if you do it right, you can actually compete to get your hands on the lever of the vice. And the bottom line is, in Illinois, for example, one of the reasons Illinois has been so challenged is never been anybody with a liberty-based public policy point of view trying to do this in Illinois. I've lived there 25 years, and it's very interesting to go through this process, especially 3 years into it. One of the state rep I was recently talking to basically said, there's never been anybody like you guys here before. We're talking about it in this way. And one of the things that is very important about the political advice, and we'll touch on this in the marketing session, is that when we talk to elected officials, we try to talk to them in the language they consume. We try to get our activists that we work with to communicate with them in the language that they consume. What I mean by that is the experience I had working with other think tanks in the years prior was that we tend to sell public policy, those of us who are driven by principle, we tend to sell it in terms of just on its merits or on the data. Meanwhile, the left is selling policy based on anecdotes and human stories. John Kramer, who runs the marketing shop at the Institute for Justice, who's one of the smartest marketing guys I know, has a term he uses called personalize, humanize, and dramatize. What the left is very good at is doing that. They personalize public policy stories, they humanize it, and then they create drama. We tend not to do that. The Democrats will say during a campaign, tax cuts, that's transferring money from the poor to the rich. Of course, that's not true, but that's what they say. And we say tax cuts create jobs. What we should say is tax cuts help a poor working class guy who's out of work have that door open so he can apply for a job. We should tell the story in that way, rather than say 17,000 people will get a new job if we make this tax cut. And we have to start changing the way we do it. The key point here on the political advice is that the politicians consume things in a particular way. Their number one driver, let me ask you that question. What do you think drives most politicians? Re-election, that is exactly the right answer. One of the things that I did not know, that I found somewhat shocking, is that politicians are not policy people. And that was news to me. I always thought they were policy people and that they went into it because they cared about ideas. That is generally not true. That doesn't mean politicians are necessarily bad people, but it's a career path. And there's all kinds of things about being a politician that are very fun if you like it. So they actually are driven by political imperatives. And it goes back to this whole idea of the vice. Their goal, once they're in there, is to stay in power. So when we talk to them, we first talk to them in terms of why this policy is in their political interest. So here's the constituent groups that will be supportive. Here's how you can sell it in a way that is consumable by those constituent groups. Here's how the media will handle it. Here's how local groups in your district will handle it. And here's why it's good policy, too, and why it's beneficial for the state from a policy point of view. But we finish it, that's the finishing point. We always talk about the political imperatives from their point of view. And then we really drive it home with the policy. And the last thing we try to do is tell the story in human terms. And we try to get people in our network of activists to tell those stories themselves. And the way we like to put it is we want to tell the story at the point of intersection between policy and people. So whatever the policy is, you have to think about when that's implemented. Here's a perfect example. I'm using a wired mic because a new government regulation doesn't let the wireless frequency be used for wireless mics anymore. So what has happened, and this is a minor inconvenience, but what has happened now is everybody all across America has ordered these wireless mics. And so there's a shortage. So everybody all over the country is using a wired mic today because nobody has a wireless mic because the manufacturers are out because of government regulation. This is the point of intersection right here in public policy. That happens all the time, whether it's starting up a business, getting some health care benefit, and so forth. So the whole point here, from my point of view, that we're trying to do in Illinois is we're trying to build capacity so that we can get our hands on the lever and apply pressure for one of the main three drivers of why politicians do things. When a politician votes on something, what do you think is the primary driver, whether they vote yes or no?